Did you know that homosexuals were criminalized in Germany during the Nazi regime? You might not be surprised by this, knowing how cruel life has been in the hands of the Nazis. However, things are far worse if you feel deep emotions for the same gender. Records show that 80% of gay men sent to the notorious Nazi concentration camp died there, but despite how horrifying their stories are, some still found love among the horror, and some saved lives of others. Well, that's worth remembering, and in today's video, let us travel back in time to Germany and discover the untold truth of homosexuality during the time of the Nazis. Gay men in Germany. Adolf Hitler planned a 1,000-year Reich, which was ambitious, to say the least. While this only lasted for 12 years, still, in that short amount of time, 100,000 men were arrested. About half of them were sent to prison, and 15,000 were deported to concentration camps. By 1945, more than 40,000 such camps were in operation, and homosexuals were the target of these camps after thousands of them were sent to stay and be imprisoned for an undetermined amount of time. But believe it or not, before the Nazis came to power in 1933, gay communities and networks flourished in the big cities of Germany. Since there was not much prohibition regarding the matter, people had been debating whether such a relationship should be tolerated. They are mostly referring to paragraph 175, the statute of the German Criminal Code that banned sexual relations between men. But the thing is, paragraph 175 was only against men-to-men relationships. It did not criminalize sexual relations between women, so we can say there was not a total ban at all. If you have watched films like Cabaret, which was set in Berlin, Germany, you would see how bars are full of men and women who love the company of one another, who adores people of the same gender without much thinking of what love is supposed to be. There were over 100 bars that catered to the community in Berlin alone. As a result, communities and networks in Germany continued to grow and develop during the Weimar Republic from 1918 to 1933. However, that was a time of political turmoil and economic distress, but then also a time of cultural and artistic freedom. At this time, the Germans publicly challenged gender and sexual norms. But things changed when the Nazis came. They revised paragraph 175 to make it broader and harsher. And just like that, life was never the same as before. Auschwitz and the 97 gay men. Concentration camps were put up in different parts of Germany, and men who were out of the closet were arrested, while almost 40% of them were deported. While these camps sound nothing short of a nightmare, there was one specific location that took the cake. It's called Auschwitz. Out of the 97 gay men known to have been sent to Auschwitz, 96 of them were German, and the numbers will shock you. Scholars have exhumed 64 of them. 51 died in the camp. That's 80%, a higher number than any other category of undesirable, except for Jewish deportees. Auschwitz, also known as Auschwitz-Birkenau, opened sometime in 1940 and is known to be the largest death camp of the Nazis. It was where Jewish people and other enemies of the Nazis were exterminated in gas chambers or slave labor. It had 3 camps in it. The main camp, the Auschwitz one, started operating in May 1940. The camp's gate had the infamous Arbeit macht frei, which means work sets you free, sign above it. And if this does not say how horrible being in the camp is, then I don't know what is. On top of this, the camp had makeshift gas chambers, but was mainly a prison facility outside of a former army barracks. Imagine stepping into this kind of place with the knowledge of what gas chambers are like. Yes, the place was beyond horrible. Prisoners were forced to work and faced the prospect of barbaric experiments by SS doctors, as well as sterilization and castration. The second camp was Birkenau, known as the Nazis' major killing center and the largest cemetery in the world. Lastly, the third camp was Monowitz, which operated a year after. This was where factories of German companies were set up using inmates as slave labor. To make matters worse, people were segregated like they were not humans at all. Books would reveal that Jewish people will wear a yellow star to establish their identity, while homosexuals will be given a pink star to be differentiated from the rest of the crowd. Rainbows in concentration camps. After the Nazis came to power, people who loved the same gender had it tough, and their lives were never the same anymore. Nazis persecuted them and closed all bars that would serve people from the community. The Nazis also began persecuting sexual minorities. They even banned gay publications, and anything that was related queer life was immediately shut down. Many men were arrested under the revised paragraph 175, and the law was used as a weapon against queer people. So why did the Nazis dislike homosexuality so much? Well, the answer is mainly because they think that being part of the community would degrade the Aryan race and that they would seduce and corrupt children. Also, they find stereotypes to justify their actions, such as possible carriers of a disease that weakened the nation. Not exactly sure what disease they refer to, but Nazis' intentions are reasonable. However, their way of implementing actions to respond to these calls is not. At the same time, queer people are treated with so much dislike that, unlike Jews, they were not marked for immediate death, but they suffered gruesome and unusual cruelty in the camps. They were isolated, and every attempt that they made at contact with other prisoners brought them under suspicion of initiating promiscuous relations. Severe punishment was able to be implemented, and sadly, they had to endure so much pain and suffering just because they chose to love a person from the same gender. This was the Nazis' way of morally purifying the country. But wait, there's more, because it just gets worse after this. They were forced to sign confessions and were jailed without trial. They were at the bottom of the concentration camp hierarchy. As a result, a lot of them would prefer to end their own life than suffer such a horrendous fate under the hands of their captors, because, at the end of the day, all homosexuals sent to Auschwitz died. First steps outside the Holocaust. After the war, although 80% of them were killed or died, some were able to get out of the camps and live a free life. However, many had difficulty finding work, especially if employers knew they were arrested for violating laws such as paragraph 175. Some remained in the concentration camps, others fled to different places, and some tried to get into mandatory Palestine. However, the doors were usually closed by British restrictions. The United States had difficult immigration policies, and so it was almost impossible for them to get in there. In the end, thousands were able to get to South Africa, Australia, and South America, where they started anew. Getting out of the Holocaust was far from stepping back into life, but it was heaven to the survivors. Though many were able to escape and get to new places, there were still many of them who stayed and congregated with others in camps that were set up by the Allies after the war. These camps were called displaced persons camps, also known as DP camps. Conditions in the DP camps, especially in the beginning, were very difficult. Most of the camps were still located in former concentration camps and former army barracks, which means that it wasn't as different as their terrifying life when it was still called a concentration camp. Food, water, sanitation, and medicine were very scarce, and there were still people dying weeks after the war was over. The DP camps were seen as places where refugees would take their first steps forward and move on to the horrors of the past. But it's undeniable that it was a very hard first step, to say the least, the beginning of an end. After the Nazi regime, their laws were abolished as well. However, some statutes remained in force, and most of them are still discriminatory to people who belong to the LGBTQ+ community. Thus, we can't deny the fact they left a mark on the country, a mark that will forever be remembered. Most historians also believe that the Nazis didn't just kill humanity and culture, they killed the future. Somewhere in the crowd, some people once loved because they wanted to love. And despite how true and precious the feelings they shared for one another, time was not in their favor, and yet their stories are worth being told. How about you? Let us know what you think in the comments below, and make sure to give this video a like and subscribe for more stories from history.